The Cashflow Framework, A Guide to Achieving Financial Freedom by Robert Kiyosaki. Read by Maxime Metzger. Preface. What is your purpose in life? What do you want to do when you grow up? That's a question that was asked of most of us. I was interested in a lot of things when I was little, and it was easy to choose. If it sounded exciting and prestigious, I was in. I wanted to be a marine biologist, an astronaut, a marine, a ship's officer, a pilot, and a professional football player. I was lucky enough to realize 3 of his dreams. I was a marine, ship's officer, and pilot. I knew I didn't want to become a teacher, a writer, or an accountant. I didn't want to be a teacher because I failed twice in English and didn't finish my MBA because I hated accounting. Ironically, as an adult, I became everything I didn't want to become. Even though I didn't like school, I now own an educational business. I teach classes all over the world because I love teaching. And although I was failed twice in English because I didn't know how to write, I'm now known mostly as an author. My book, Poor Father, Rich Father, was on the New York Times bestsellers list for more than 7 years. It is one of the 3 best-selling books in the United States. It is annoyed only by the joys of sex and the least traveled path. And to add to the irony, Rich Father, Poor Father, and Cash Flow are a book and a game that deals with accounting. Another discipline I had trouble with. But what does all this have to do with the question? What is your purpose in life? The answer lies in a simple but profound assertion by a Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. Voice and purpose. In other words, finding your purpose in life is finding your voice. Your voice is not your profession, your income, your title, or your successes and failures. Finding your voice is finding out what you are here for on earth. What is your mission? Why did you give this gift of life? And what will you give back to life? In hindsight, I now know that going to school doesn't help us find our voice in life. I spent 4 years at the military school where I studied and trained to become an officer. If I had made a career at Standard Oil as a ship's officer, I would never have found my voice. If I had stayed in the navies where I became an airline pilot, I would never have found my voice. Had I remained a ship's officer, or had I become an airline pilot, I would never have become an author of international bestsellers. I would never have been invited to Oprah Winfrey's show. I would never have written a book with Donald Trump, and I would never have created an international educational company that teaches entrepreneurship and investment around the world. Find your voice. The Cashflow Frame is an important book because it deals with this quest. As you know, most people are programmed early in life to go to school and find a job. The school is used to find employment in E or T careers. It doesn't guide you to your voice. I know there are people who are very young and know exactly what they will do in life. They grow up knowing that they will be doctors, lawyers, musicians, golfers, or actors. We've all heard about child prodigies, those children who are exceptionally talented. But you will notice that this is a profession and not necessarily a voice in life. So how do you find your voice in life? Here's my answer. I'd like to know. If at the stroke of a magic wand I could reveal your voice, I will. Since I don't have a magic wand and I can't tell you what to do, the best I can do is tell you my story. I trusted my intuition, my heart, and my instinct. For example, in 1973, after the war returned, when my poor father advised me to go back to school, graduate, and work for the government, my mind immediately became numb. My heart grew heavier, and my instinct said, no way. Then when he suggested that I return to my job at Standard Oil or become an airline pilot, again, my mind, my heart, and my instinct said no. I knew I was done with navigation and flying, even though they were good professionals. In 1973, at the age of 26, I became an adult. I had taken my father's advice and gone to school. I had graduated from college and had 2 professions, a ship's license and a pilot's license. But the problem was that it was about profession, childhood dreams. At the age of 26, I was old enough to know that education is a process. For example, when I wanted to become a ship's officer, I attended a school that trained ship's officers. And when I wanted to learn how to fly, I went to the U.S. Navy Flight School, a 2-year process that turned non-pilots into pilots. I approached my next learning process with caution. I wanted to know what I was going to become before I started anything. Traditional schools had been good for me. I had managed to become what I dreamed of as a child, but reaching adulthood was troubling because there was no sign that it's this way. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Everything would have been simple if I had only wanted another profession. If I had wanted to become a doctor, I would have enrolled in medical school. If I had wanted to become a lawyer, I would have gone to law school, but I knew there was something more to life than getting another professional title. I didn't realize it at the time, but at the age of 26, I was looking for my voice in life and not another profession, a different education. In 1973, during my last year of active service as a pilot in the Navy, and while I was based not far from home in Hawaii, I knew I wanted to follow in my rich father's footsteps. I enrolled in real estate and management courses that I attended on weekends and prepared to become an entrepreneur and evolve in the P&I frameworks. At the same time, on the recommendation of a friend's friend, I also enrolled in a personal development course, hoping to learn who I really was. I didn't think that kind of course was part of a traditional education program because I didn't take it for credits or grades. I didn't know what he was going to teach me, unlike my real estate classes. All I knew was that it was time to learn more about me. On the first weekend, the professor drew a simple diagram on a flip chart. To see this drawing, see diagram 1 on page 1 of the appendix. The teacher then turned to the group and said, "To become a whole human being, you have to undergo mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual learning." As I listened to these explanations, I realized that the primary purpose of traditional schools was to develop students' mental skills. That is why so many people who do so well in school do not do so well in real life, especially in the financial arena. It was during that weekend that I discovered why I didn't like school. I realized that I loved learning, but I hated educational institutions. Traditional education was an ideal environment for the first class, but it was not an environment that suited me. Traditional education overwhelmed me, trying to motivate me with fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of failing, and fear of not finding a job. She programmed me to become an employee in E or T. I realized that traditional education is not suitable for the individual who wants to become an entrepreneur in P and I. This probably explains why so many entrepreneurs never finished their studies. Entrepreneurs like Thomas Edison, founder of General Electric, Henry Ford, founder of Ford Motor Co., Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, Walt Disney, founder of Disneyland, and Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook. The course continued, and the professor increasingly delved into his 4 types of personal development. I realized that I had spent most of my life in a hostile educational environment. After 4 years of studying at an all-male military academy and 5 years as a Navy pilot, I was pretty strong mentally and physically. As a naval pilot, I was strong emotionally and spiritually, but only on the wrong macho plane. I had no soft side, no feminine energy. After all, I had been trained to become a naval officer, emotionally calm under pressure, programmed to kill and spiritually prepared to die for my country. If you've seen the movie Top Gun, starring Tom Cruise, you've had a glimpse into the male world and the bravado that characterizes the lives of military pilots. I loved this world. I was effective in this world. It was a modern world of knights and warriors. It wasn't a world for wimps. During the seminar, I explored my emotions and was able to touch my mind briefly. I cried a lot because I had a lot to cry about. I had done and seen things that no one should ever see. During the seminar, I try a man in my arms. Something I've never done before, not even with my father. On Sunday evening, I greeted the end of the seminar with sadness. It took place in a soft, loving, and honest environment. On Monday morning, it was a shock to find myself surrounded by young, selfish pilots who are dedicated to stealing, killing, and dying for their country. After this seminar, I realized it was time for me to change. I knew that the hardest part would be to develop myself emotionally and spiritually to become a gentler, kinder, and more compassionate person. It was contrary to everything I had learned for years at the military academy and at the flying school. I definitely turned my back on traditional education. I no longer wanted to study for grades, diplomas, promotions, or professional titles. From that point on, when I took a course or went to an educational institution, it was to learn, to become a better person. I had written off the grades, diplomas, and credentials. When you grow up in a teacher's family, the grades, the high school, the college you went to, and the postgraduate degrees are absolutely everything. Like the medals and ribbons that adorn the chest of a Navy pilot, graduate degrees in prestigious schools were the decorations that educators wore on the sleeves of their shirts. In their minds, people who had not completed high school were part of the population. They were the lost souls of society. Individuals who had a master's degree looked down on what had only a bachelor's degree, and what had a doctorate was highly respected. At the age of 26, I knew that I would never return to this universe. Editor's note. In 2009, Robert received an honorary doctorate in entrepreneurship from the prestigious Santiago University of Loyola in Lima, Peru. The other few air containers for this distinction are political leaders, including the former president of Spain. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the new books and participate in the draw. How did I find my voice? I know some of you are now wondering why he is spending so much time talking about non-traditional education. I do this because this first development seminar revived in me the love of learning, but not the kind of learning that is given to school. After this seminar, I became addicted to this kind of training, and I shackled them, one after the other, by delving deeper and deeper into what connected my body, my mind, my emotions, and my soul. The more I studied, the more I became curious about traditional education. I began to wonder why so many children hate school. Why do so few children like school? Why are so many educated people not succeeding in the real world? Does school prepare us for the realities of life? Why did I hate school but loved learning? Why are the majority of teachers poor? Why do schools teach us so little about money? These questions led me to study education outside the sacrosanct walls of the school system. The more I studied, the more I understood why I didn't like school and why educational institutions failed to serve the majority of students well, even the top of the class. My curiosity touched my mind, and I became an entrepreneur in education. Without that curiosity, I probably would never have become an author or created educational games to develop financial intelligence. My spiritual upbringing allowed me to find my voice in life. It seems that it is not in our minds that we can find our voice. Our voice matches what we find in our heart. This does not mean that an individual will not find his voice by remaining in the fold of traditional education. I'm sure, act with real-world examples. This guide transforms theory into action. He enrolled in law school after graduating as a ship's officer. He studied for another 3 years before becoming a lawyer and entering a private practice, and thus the T-frame. He died in his early 50s. He had become a very successful but unhappy lawyer. Like me, he already had 2 professions at the age of 26. Although he hated being a lawyer, he stayed because he had a family and children, a mortgage, and bills to pay. A year before his death, I saw him again at a reunion of former students in New York. He was a friendly man. All I'm doing is hanging out in the shadows of a rich guy like you. He's buying me a bunch of money. I hate what I do, and I hate the people I work for. Why don't you do something else? I can't afford to stop working. My eldest child is starting his university studies. He succumbed to a heart attack shortly after she graduated. He made a lot of money from his professional training, but he was emotionally angry, spiritually dead, and his body soon followed. I know this is an extreme example. Most people don't hate their work as much as they hate my friend. And yet it illustrates well the problem of the individual who is trapped in his profession and who is unable to find his voice. I think that's the flaw in traditional education. Millions of people drop out of school just to enter the prison of a job they don't like. They know that something is missing in their lives. Moreover, many individuals are financially strapped, earning just enough money to survive. They would like to earn more, but they do not know how to do it. Unaware of the existence of other managers, Many people return to school in order to practice a new profession or to obtain a salary increase in managers E or T, far from the universe of managers P and I. I wanted to make this education accessible to all individuals who wanted to learn, regardless of their wealth or the average they had in school. This is why the Rich Dad Company first offered the educational game, Cashflow. This game can teach in places I could never get to. The beauty of this game is that it was designed for people to teach people. The high-paid teacher and the classroom become useless. The Cashflow game has been translated into more than 16 languages and is played by millions of people around the world. Today, the Rich Dad Company offers financial training, advisory services, and a mentorship program. Our programs are particularly important for people who want to move from E&T to P&I. There's no guarantee they'll all fit into P&I, but they'll know how to access it if they want to. Changing isn't easy. As far as I'm concerned, changing the frame wasn't easy. It was hard work mentally and even more emotionally and spiritually demanding. I had grown up in a family of highly educated employees who lived within them, and I shared their values of education, job security, benefits, and public pensions. In many ways, my family's values have hindered this transition. I had to listen carefully to his warnings, his concerns, and his criticisms of me becoming an entrepreneur and investor. Here are some of those values that I had to scrap. But you have to have a job. You take too much risk, and if you fail, go back to school and get your master's degree. Become a doctor. Doctors make a lot of money. Rich people are greedy. Why is money so important to you? Money doesn't make you happy. Just live below your means. Focus on safety. Forget your dreams. Diet and exercise program. I talked about emotional and spiritual development because it is what it takes to bring about permanent change in life. For example, it is rarely effective to say to a person who is overweight, eat less and exercise more. The weight loss diet and exercise program may make mental sense, but the majority of people who are overweight don't eat because they're hungry. They eat to fill a void in their emotions and soul. When an individual undertakes a diet and exercise program, they work only on their mind and body. Without emotional development and spiritual strength, the individual with excess weight can very well monitor his diet for 6 months and lose a lot of weight too, regain even more later. The same goes for the individual who wants to change the dial. If you say to yourself, I'm going to become an entrepreneur and evolve within the P framework, your wish is as pious as that of the guest smoker who says, tomorrow I quit smoking. Smoking is a physical dependence caused by emotional and spiritual difficulties. Without emotional and spiritual support, the smoker will always be a smoker. This also applies to the alcoholic, sex addict, or compulsive buyer. The majority of addictions are attempts to find happiness. That's why my company offers mind and body classes, as well as counseling and a mentoring program to ease the transition emotionally and spiritually. A few individuals are able to make this journey alone, but I was not one of them. If I hadn't had the advice of my rich father and the support of my wife Kim, I would never have succeeded. I've tried many times to drop everything. And if it hadn't been for Kim and for my rich father, I would have given up. Why do the first class fail? If you look at chart number 2 on page 1 of the appendix, it's easy to understand why so many first-class students fail in the financial world. An individual may be well-educated mentally, but if he is not emotionally well-educated, his fear will often prevent his body from doing what it should do. This is why so many first-class students suffer from analytical paralysis, dwelling on every little detail but never managing to take action. This analysis paralysis is caused by our education system, which punishes students for making mistakes. When you think about it, the first class is only because they make fewer mistakes. The problem with this emotional psychosis is that in the real world, the people who act are the ones who make the most mistakes and learn from them in order to win the game of life. Consider Presidents Clinton and Bush. Clinton was unable to admit that he had sex, and Bush did not recall making any mistakes during his 2 terms in office. Mistakes are human, but lying about our mistakes is criminal. This is a wrongdoing known as perjury. When he was criticized for making 104 mistakes before inventing the light bulb, Thomas Edison said, "I haven't failed 104 times. I only found 104 solutions that don't work." In other words, the reason why so many people fail is that they fail enough times. Look again at diagram number 2 on page 1 of the appendix. Part of the reason why so many people cling to their job security is because of a lack of emotional education. He lets fear immobilize them. The education offered by the military academy and the Marine Corps is a great advantage. These institutions spend a lot of time developing young men and women spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Although this education is extremely rigorous, it is comprehensive and prepares students for dangerous work. I created the game Cashflow because it offers an integral education. It is a better teaching tool than a book or lecture, simply because it appeals to the player's body, mind, emotions, and soul. The game is designed so that players make as many mistakes as possible with the dummy money and learn from it. In my opinion, this is the most humane way to learn how to manage money. Voice is the goal. Today, there are thousands of cash flow clubs around the world. One of the reasons these clubs are important is that they protect players from the storm, that they are a step that makes them discover their voice in life. By joining a cash flow club, you're meeting people like you, people who are committed to making changes in their lives and who aren't just talking about it. Unlike the education system, gambling does not require any prior academic skills, achievement. You just have to be inhabited by a sincere desire to learn and make changes in your life. By playing, you will make a lot of mistakes in different financial situations, and you will learn from them by using dummy money. Cash flow clubs are not for people who want to get rich quickly. Cash flow clubs are there to support long-term changes, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical changes that the player will have to manage. We all change and evolve at a different pace, and the game encourages you to progress according to your abilities. After playing cash flow a few times with other people, you'll have a better idea of what your next step should be and which asset class, business, real estate, portfolio securities, or product is best for you. In conclusion, finding your voice is not necessarily easy. Even today, I don't really know if I found mine. As you know, we all get lost at some point, and it's not always easy to find our way back. If you feel that you are not in the right frame or that you are not moving in the right direction, I encourage you to question your heart and find that voice. For example, you will know that it is time to change if the following statements are part of your speech. I work with good airmen. I like what I do, but I'd like to make more money. I'm looking forward to the weekend. I want to be my own master. Will it be 5 p.m. soon? My sister is a non-Buddhist. His voice in life is to assist the Dalai, a voice that does not bring much in return. And yet, despite her meager income, that does not mean she is poor. She owns a rental property and investments, gold and silver. His strength of character and financial education allow him to follow his voice without having to make vows of poverty. In many ways, it was a good thing that I was labeled a stupid student. Although it was emotionally painful, this pain allowed me to find my voice as a teacher. And since my sister is a nun, just because I'm a teacher doesn't mean I have to be a poor teacher. Again, as T. Nathan said, voice and purpose. Introduction. What is the context in which you find yourself? Enjoy financial freedom. If you've reached a financial crossroads, the cash flow framework to achieve financial freedom is for you. If you want to take control of what you do today to change your financial destiny, this book will help you steer your efforts in the right direction. Here is the cash flow frame that you can find on page 2 of the appendix. The letters used in each of the frames correspond to E, employee, self-employed and small business owner, P, large business owner, I, investor. Each of us is at least in one of the 4 frames of the cash flow. It is the source of our income that determines our position. Many of us are employees who depend on a piece check, while others are self-employed. Employees and self-employed are located on the left side of the cash flow frame. The right-hand side is reserved for those whose income comes from their own business or investment. The cash flow framework is an easy way to categorize people based on their source of income. Each frame is unique, and the people who move within each frame share common characteristics. The executives will show you where you stand today and help you develop an action plan to know where you want to be in the future when you choose your own path to financial freedom. While financial freedom can be found in each of the 4 frameworks, the abilities of a P or I will help you reach your financial goals faster. A prosperous E must become an I to ensure financial security in retirement. What do you want to do when you grow up? This audiobook is in many ways the second part of A Rich Father, Poor. For those of you who haven't listened or read it, it's a book that deals with the different lessons that my 2 fathers taught me about money and the choices you have to make in life. One of them was my real father, while the other was his best friend. One was highly educated, and the other had dropped out of high school. One was poor, and the other rich. My poor father's advice. When I was growing up, my father, who was highly educated but poor, always said, go to school, get high grades, and find yourself a secure and stable job. He was advising me on a life course that resembled the number 2 frame on page 2 of the schedule. He recommended that I become a well-paid employee, or a self-employed person practicing as a doctor, lawyer, or accountant. My poor father was very concerned about the idea of a regular peace check, benefits, and job security. That is why he himself was a well-paid public servant. He was the director of education for the state of Hawaii. Advice from my rich father. On the other hand, my rich but uneducated father gave me very different advice. He said, go to school, get a degree, start a business, and become a successful investor. He advocated a path that resembled the number 3 box on page 3 of the schedule. This audiobook discusses the mental, emotional, and educational processes I borrowed following my rich father's advice. Who is this audiobook for? This audiobook has been recorded for those who are ready to change frames. It is particularly aimed at those who are currently E and T and who wish to become P and I. It is designed for those who are prepared to leave job security behind and embark on the path to financial security. This is not an easy life path, but the reward at the end of the road is a journey toward financial freedom. When I was 12, my rich father told me a simple story that guided me to fortune and financial freedom. This was his way of explaining what distinguishes the left side of the cash flow frame, the E and T on the right side, where the P and I are located. That's the way the story goes. Once upon a time, there was a small village with old-fashioned charm. It was a very good place to live, except for one problem. The village was without water unless it rained. To solve this problem, once and for all, the village elders decided to bid on the water contract on a daily basis. 2 people offered their services, and the elders awarded them both the contract. They felt that a little competition would keep prices from going up and would provide an additional guarantee of supply. Edward, the first of the 2 entrepreneurs, went straight to work. He bought 2 galvanized steel buckets and set out to drive back and forth on the path leading to the lake 1.5 kilometers from the village. He immediately started earning money because he was working from dawn to dusk, bringing water from the lake in his 2 jumps. He was dumping the contents of the tanks into a large concrete reservoir that the village had built. Every morning, he had to get up before everyone else to make sure the villagers didn't run out of water. It was hard work, but he was very happy to make money and get one of the 2 exclusive contracts for this company. Bernard, the second entrepreneur, disappeared for a while. We didn't see him for months, which made Edward happy because he had no competition. Edward made all the money. Instead of buying 2 jumps to compete with Edward, Bernard had written a business plan. Start a business, find 4 investors, hire a president to oversee everything, and he came back 6 months later with a team of workers. Within a year, his team built a high-volume stainless steel pipeline connecting the village to the lake. At the grand opening ceremony, Bernard announced that his water was cleaner than Edward's. Bernard knew that some villagers were full of the lack of cleanliness regarding the quality of the water. Bernard also announced that he could supply the village with water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Edward delivered his water only the week. He didn't work on weekends. Then Bernard said his prices would be 75% lower than Edward's for higher quality water and a more reliable supply. The villagers applauded and immediately rushed to the tap at the end of Bernard's pipeline. To be competitive, Edward immediately reduced his fare by 75%, bought 2 more jumps, added lids and began transporting 4 jumps at a time. In order to provide better service, he hired his 2 sons to lend him strong hands on evenings and weekends. When his sons left the village to pursue their education, he told them, "Come back soon, for this business will belong to you." For some reason, these 2 sons did not return at the end of their studies. Edward hired employees and had conflicts with the union. It called for higher wages, better benefits, and only 1 jump at a time. Meanwhile, Bernard realized that if this village needed water, so should other villages. He won his business plan and set out to sell his fast, economical, safe, and efficient supply system around the world. He was making only 1 cent a jump, but he was delivering billions of dollars a day. Whether he went to work or not, billions of people were consuming billions of dollars of soda, and all that money was pouring into his bank account. Bernard designed a pipeline that allowed him to bring money to him just as he brought water to the village. Bernard lived happily from then on. Edward worked hard until the end of his life and constantly experienced financial problems. End of story. This story about Bernard and Edward has guided me for years. She helped me make some important decisions. I often ask myself, am I building a pipeline or carrying jumps? Am I working hard or working smart? And the answers to these questions brought me financial freedom. And that's what this book is about. It deals with what makes it possible to become a P or an I. It is for those who are tired of jumping around and are ready to build pipelines that will put the money in their pockets. This audiobook is divided into 3 parts. First part. The first part focuses on the fundamental differences that exist between people within the 4 frameworks. It shows why some people gravitate around a certain dial and often trample on it without realizing it. It will help you clarify where you stand today in the framework and where you want to be in 5 years. Part 2. The second part deals with personal change. It's more about who you need to be than what you need to do. Third part. The third part of this book explains how to find success on the right side of the cash flow frame. I will share with you yet more secrets from my wealthy father about the skills required to become a successful P or I. It will help you choose your own voice towards financial freedom. Throughout the cash flow framework, I keep emphasizing the importance of financial intelligence. To evolve on the right side, the P and I side, you have to be smarter than those who choose to stay on the left side, the E and T side. To be a P or I, you need to be able to control where your income comes from. This book is for those who are ready to make changes in their lives. It is also for those who are willing to leave job security behind and start building their own pipeline to achieve financial freedom. We are in the information era, and this exceptional space offers more fruitful opportunities and financial rewards than ever before. Individuals with P&I skills will be able to recognize these opportunities and seize them on the fly. To succeed on the information era, an individual will have to draw on each of the 4 frameworks. Unfortunately, our schools are still in the industrial era and only continue to steer their students to the left side of the cash flow dial. If you're looking for new answers to venture into the news, this book is for you. It doesn't provide all the answers, but you will find a summary of my journey as I moved from the E and T side to the P and I side. First part, the cash flow frame. Chapter 1. Why can't you find a job? It's hard to explain to someone who values work why you don't want it. In 1985, my wife Kim and I were without you and without a job. Our savings were meager. Our credit cards were no longer enough, and we lived in an old brown Toyota whose seats, when tilted, were used as a bed. And then at the end of a certain week, we realized the cruel reality, what we were doing, and where we were heading. Our homelessness status lasted for more weeks. Seeing our desperate financial situation, a friend offered us a room in her basement. We lived there for 9 months. We kept quiet about our situation. Actually, Kim and I were pretty normal looking. When friends and family members were informed of our misfortune, the first question he always asked us was, "Why don't you find a job?" At first, we tried to explain our motives, but mostly unsuccessfully. It's hard to explain to someone who values work why you don't want it. We used to have a few temporary jobs and make a few dollars here and a few dollars there. But we only did it to put bread on the table and gas in the tank of the car. That money only helped keep us on the path to our ultimate goal. I must admit that the prospect of stable employment with a paycheck seemed attractive to me at times of profound doubt. But because we were not seeking job security, we persevered, living hand to mouth on the edge of the abyss. That year, in 1985, it was the worst year of our lives, and also the longest. Anyone who says that money does not matter has obviously not been deprived of it for a long time. Who and I have fought a lot. Fear, uncertainty, and hunger cut through emotions and often push us against what we love most. However, love has kept us together, and adversity has helped to strengthen the bond that held us together as a couple. We knew where we were going. We just didn't know if we would ever get there. We knew we could always find a secure and well-paying job. We both had a university degree and were well qualified, but we were not moving towards job security. We were moving towards financial freedom. In 1989, we were millionaires. Though prosperous in the eyes of some people, we had not yet realized our dreams. We had not yet reached true financial freedom. We had to wait until 1994, so we didn't have to work for the rest of our lives. Unless there was an unforeseen disaster, we were completely free financially. Kim was 37 and I was 47. You don't have to have money to make money. I started this chapter by talking about total deprivation, because I often hear people say that it takes money to make money. I don't agree. It did not take money to go from homelessness in 1985 to being rich in 1989, and then to become financially free in 1994. We had no money in the first place, and we had debts, nor is it necessary to have a formal education. I have a university degree, and I can honestly say that achieving financial freedom has nothing to do with what I learned in school. The years I studied mathematics, trigonometry, chemistry, physics, and English and French literature didn't bring me much. Many prosperous people left school without a degree. People such as Thomas Edison, founder of General Electric, Henry Ford, founder of Ford Motor Co., Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, Ted Turner, founder of CNN, Michael Dell, founder of Dell Computers, the late Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Computer, and Ralph Lauren, founder of Polo. University training is important for traditional occupations, but it does not affect how people become prosperous. They build successful businesses that belong to them. And that's what Kim and I are working hard to do. So what is needed? I am often asked if you don't need money to make money, and if schools don't teach you how to become financially free, then what do you need? Here's my answer. You have to have a dream. You have to have a lot of determination. You have to have the will to learn quickly. You have to have the ability to maximize the assets that God has given you, and you have to figure out which part of the cash flow framework you need to draw your income from. What is the cash flow frame? The diagram corresponding to the cash flow frame is shown on page 2 of the annex. The letters in each of the frames correspond to E, employee, self-employed, and small. Business owner, large business owner, I, investor. From which framework do you derive your income? The cash flow frame illustrates the different methods by which income or money is generated. For example, an employee earns money by holding a job and working for someone or a company. The self-employed person earns money by working on his own account. The business owner runs a money-generating business, and the investor makes money from his investments. In other words, money that generates money. Different methods of generating income require different mindsets, different technical skills, different pedagogical orientation, and different types of people. Each frame attracts a particular type of person. While money remains money, the ways of earning it can be extremely diverse. If you're going to look at what each frame is, you might wonder what frame the majority of my income is from. Each frame is different. Each requires special skills and personality. Moving from one dial to another is like playing golf in the morning and watching a broom performance in the evening. You can generate revenue in each of the 4 frames. Most of us have the potential to generate revenue in each of the 4 frameworks. The framework in which you and I choose to draw our main income is not really based on what we learned in school, but rather on what we are inside, our values, strengths, weaknesses, and interests. It's those fundamental differences that make one or the other framework either attractive or discouraging. However, no matter what type of work we do, we can still evolve within the 4 frameworks. For example, a doctor may choose to earn his or her main income as an employee and add to the pension of staff of a large hospital or insurance company, where he or she can work for the government in public health systems, where he or she can become a military doctor. The same doctor can also decide to make money as a self-employed worker and open his own practice, hire employees and build his own list of patients, where that doctor can decide to become a piece and be the owner of a clinic or a lab and hire other doctors. He would probably then hire a commercial manager to run his business. In that case, he would be the owner of the business, but he would not have to work there. He could also decide to own a business that has no connection with the medical world while continuing to practice medicine elsewhere. In this case, the doctor would have income as EP. As an I, that doctor could also earn income by investing in another person's business or financial vehicles such as the stock market, the bond market, or real estate. The important words are generating revenue from them. It's not so much what we do to generate that revenue, but how we generate it. Different methods to generate revenue. Above all, it is the fundamental differences in our values, strengths, weaknesses, and interests that determine the framework from which we choose to generate our income. Some love being employees while others hate it. Some people love being business owners but hate running them. Others love owning and leading them. Some people love to invest while others see it only as a risk of losing money. Success within the 4 frameworks often means reorienting some of our core values. You can be rich or poor in each of the 4 frames. It is also important to note that one can be rich or poor in each of the 4 frames. Some people earn millions and others go bankrupt in each of them. Being in one or the other of the executives does not necessarily guarantee financial success. Not all framers are equal. Knowing the various characteristics of each frame will help you determine which one or more of them is best for you. For example, one of the many reasons I chose to work primarily in IP executives is related to tax benefits. Few legal tax deductions are possible for most people who work on the left side of the dial. On the other hand, there are many for those on the right. By working in executive countries, I could make money faster and grow it longer without having to pay large sums of money to the government in taxes. Different ways to make money. When people ask us why Kim and I didn't have you, I tell them it's because of what my rich father taught me about money. Money is important to me, but I didn't want to spend my life working to earn money. That's why I didn't want a job. To be responsible citizens, Kim and I wanted our money to be at our service. We didn't want to spend our lives working physically for him. That's why the cash flow frame is important. It represents the different ways of making money. It is possible to be responsible and generate income rather than work physically to do so. Different father, different idea about money. My highly educated father believed strongly that the love of money was despicable, that excessive profit was synonymous with avarice. He felt embarrassed when his salary was reported in the papers because he felt that he was being overpaid compared to the teachers who worked for him. He was a good, honest, hard-working man who did his best to make the case that money was not important in his life. My highly educated father, though poor, kept repeating, "I'm not interested in money. I'll never be rich. I can't afford to buy that. Investing is a risky business. Money is not the only thing in life. Money is the basis of life. My rich father had a different point of view. He thought it was ridiculous to spend his life working for money and pretend that money did not matter. My wealthy father believed that life was more important than money, but that money was important for sustaining life. He would often say, "You only have a certain number of hours in a day, and you can't work harder than you can afford. So why work for money? Learn to have money and to make others work for you, and you will be free to do the things that are important." Here was what was important to my rich father: to have plenty of time to raise his children, to have money to donate to charity, and to support the projects he cherished. Creating jobs and financial stability in her community. Have the time and money to take care of your health. Be able to travel the world with your family. All these things cost money, my rich father said. That's why money is important to me. Money is important, but I don't want to spend my life working for him. Part of the reason why I chose to be a leader was because I had more training and education in areas related to the country framework that my wife and I chose to focus on when we didn't have roofs. Through my wealthy father's education, I knew of the various financial and professional benefits of each cadet. To me, the executives on the right, the P&I executives, offered the best opportunities to achieve prosperity and financial freedom. In addition, at the age of 37, I had experienced successes and failures in each of the four frames, which had led me to better know my temperament, my tastes, my dislikes, my strengths, and my weak points. I knew the framework in which I would evolve best. Parents are teachers. When I was a young boy, my rich father often referred to the cash flow framework. He explained to me what distinguishes a successful person on the left side from a successful person on the right side. As a very young man, I didn't really pay attention to those words. I didn't understand the difference between the mentality of an employee and the mentality of a business owner. I was just trying to survive school. However, I had heard these words, and soon they began to make their way into my mind. The fact that they were surrounded by two successful dynamic pairs made their respective comments very significant. But it was their actions that allowed me to begin to distinguish between the P side and the P side of the dial. At first, the differences made me very subtle, and then they dazzled me. For example, the little boy I was at the time had a painful experience of the lack of time that one father could devote to him compared to the other. As each father's success and importance grew, it became clear that one father had less and less time to spend with his wife and 4 children. My father-in-law was always somewhere else, in a meeting or on his way to the airport to go to another meeting. The more successful he was, the fewer meals we ate as a family. He spent weekends in his small, cluttered office, overwhelmed by paperwork. However, my rich father had more and more freedom as he became successful. One of the reasons I learned so much about money, finances, business, and life is simply that my wealthy father was spending more and more time with his children and with myself. As another example, both my fathers were succeeding and earning more and more money. But my real father, the scholar, was also sinking into debt. So he worked harder and ended up in a higher tax bracket. His banker and accountant advised him to buy a bigger house so that he could get a so-called tax cut. My father took their advice and bought a bigger house, and soon he had to work harder than ever to earn more money to pay for the new house, which took her even further away from her family. My rich father was different. He was making money and more money, but he was paying less tax. He also had bankers and accountants, but he didn't get the same advice from them as my highly educated father. The main reason, in fact, was what happened to my very educated father at the height of his career, which caused me not to remain on the left side of the dial. By the early 1970s, I had already completed my university studies and found myself in Pensacola, Florida, undergoing training as a pilot in the Marine Rifles that would take me to Vietnam. My highly educated father was then director of education for the state of Hawaii and a member of the governor's staff. One night, he phoned me and gave me some interesting news. "Son," he told me, "I'm going to resign and run for lieutenant governor of Hawaii State for the Republican Party." With a ball in my throat, I asked him, "Are you going to run against your boss?" "That's right," he said. Why did I ask him? Republicans don't stand a chance in Hawaii. The Democratic Party and the labor organizations are too strong. I know that, son. I also know I'm not being asked to win. Judge Samuel King is running for governor, and I will be his partner. Why did I ask him again? Why run against your boss if you know you're going to lose? Because my conscience doesn't allow me to do otherwise. I am concerned about the games played by these politicians. Are you saying they're corrupt? Did I add? I don't want to say that, my real father replied. He was an honest man of high moral character who rarely spoke ill of others. He was still a diplomat. However, the tone of his voice indicated to me that he was angry and concerned when he added, "I would only say that my conscience hurts me when I see what is happening behind the scenes. I couldn't live in peace with myself if I closed my eyes and did nothing. My job and my peace check are not as important as my conscience." After a long silence, I realized that my father had made a firm decision. "Good luck," I said softly. "I am proud of you and your courage, and I am proud to be your son." My father and the Republican list were crushed as planned. The re-elected governor made it clear that my father would never get a job with the Hawaiian government again. He never got any more. At the age of 54, my father was looking for work and I was leaving for Vietnam. In my prime, my father was looking for a new job. Positions with a high but low-paid title have taken over from other positions with a high but low-paid title. He was a tall, bright, and dynamic man who was no longer welcome in the only world he knew, the world of government employees. He tried to start up a number of small businesses. He was a consultant for a while, and even acquired a famous franchise, but still without success. He was getting older and his strength was waning. Like his dynamism toward any new project, his lack of will grew with every failure. He was a great guy trying to survive as a T, in a setting where he had no training or experience, and where the heart was not there. He loved the world of public education, but he couldn't find a way to reintegrate it. He had been banished from it quietly. Without Social Security and health insurance, the last years of his life would have been a disaster. He died frustrated and somewhat vexed, but he died with peace of mind. So, what made me continue in the darkest hours? It's the memory of my father, highly educated, sitting at home, waiting for the phone to ring, trying to succeed in the business world, a world he knew nothing about. This episode and the wonderful memories I have of my rich father becoming ever happier and more prosperous is what inspired me. Instead of declining at age 54, my rich father was thriving. He had become rich many years before, but he was now becoming very rich. He was constantly referred to in the newspapers as the man who was buying Waikiki and Maui. The years he had methodically devoted to building businesses and investing were beginning to pay off, and he was on the verge of becoming one of Hawaii's richest men. Small differences become big differences. Because my rich father had explained to me how the framework worked, I was better able to see the small differences that become big differences over the years that a person devotes to his work. Because of the frame, I knew it was better for me to decide not what I wanted to do, but rather what I wanted to become over the years. In the darkest of times, it was this certainty and the lessons instilled by my two fathers that kept me going. The dial isn't everything. The cash flow frame is much more than 2 strokes and a few letters. If you look beneath the surface of this simple diagram, you'll see completely different worlds, as well as different ways of seeing the world. Because I've seen the world from both sides of the box, I can honestly say that it looks quite different depending on which side you're on. One dial is no better than another. Everyone has his strengths. Everyone has his weaknesses. This audiobook has been recorded to allow you to make a foray into its framers and the world of personal growth required to be financially successful in each of them. I sincerely hope that this will help you choose the financial path that suits you best. You can look again at the cash flow frame on page 2 of the appendix. Many of the skills that are essential to success on the right side of the cadet are not taught in school. That may explain why people like Bill Gates, Ted Turner, and Thomas Edison dropped out of school at a young age in order to thrive under frame P and I. This book will share the skills and temperament needed to succeed as a P and I. I'll start by doing a large overflight of the frames, then I'll focus on the sides where the P's and I's are located. After listening to this audiobook, some of you may want to change the way you earn money, and some of you will be happy to keep your life the same. You can choose to evolve in more than one frame, and even in the 4 frames. We are all different, and one frame is no more important or better than another. In every village, city, metropolis, and country of the world, there is a place for every citizen in one or the other of the framers. This is what guarantees the financial stability of the community. And as we age and experience different things, our interests change. For example, I've noticed that many young people who are recent graduates are often happy to get a job. However, after a few years, a few of them decide that they are not interested in climbing an organizational ladder, or that they lose interest in the field in which they are operating. Age and experience often drive an individual to seek new avenues of growth, new challenges, new financial compensation, and personal happiness. I hope that this audiobook will offer new ideas to achieve its goals. In short, this audiobook does not deal with the absence of you, but rather with how to find a home in one or more frames. Chapter 2, Different Framers, Different People. Changing the dial often means fundamentally changing who you are. You don't teach an old monkey to make a face, my highly educated father always said. I had sat down with him several times, explaining to him as best I could the framework of the cash flow in an effort to point him in a new financial direction. As he approached his 60s, he realized that many of his dreams would never come true. The concept of a blacklist seemed to apply well beyond the government. In fact, he was blacklisting himself. I tried, but it didn't work, he said. My father was referring to his forays into the T dial as a consultant and into the P frame when he pumped most of his savings into a famous ice cream franchise that had gone bankrupt. Very intelligent, he was basically able to understand the different technical skills required in each of the 4 frameworks. He knew he could buy them if he wanted to. But something was holding him back. One day after lunch, I told my rich father about my highly educated father. Your father and I are fundamentally different, said my rich father. While we both have fears, doubts, beliefs, strengths, and weaknesses, we react or confront these fundamental similarities very differently. Can you tell me about these differences? I asked him. Not in one meal, my rich father replied. But the way we respond to those differences is what keeps us in one or the other. When your father tried to switch from E to P, he could intellectually understand the process, but he was unable to deal with it emotionally. When things started to go wrong and he started losing money, he did not know what to do to solve his problems. So he went back to the dial where he felt most comfortable. Dial E is sometimes dial T, and I say, my rich father nodded when the fear of losing money and sinking became too painful inside. And it is a fear we all share. He chose to seek safety, while I chose to seek freedom. And that's the fundamental difference, I said, in waving to the boys to bring me the bill. Even though we are all human beings, my rich father added, when it comes to money and the emotions attached to it, we all react differently. And it is how we manage these emotions that often determines the framework within which we choose to earn our income. Different framers, different people, I said. That's right, my rich father used to say, as we got up and headed out. And to succeed in a framework, it is not enough to have technical skills. You have to know the fundamental differences that drive people to choose one or the other. Knowing that, your life will be a lot easier. We would be holding hands and saying goodbye when the parking attendant stopped my rich father's car in front of us. Oh, one last thing, I said in haste. Can my father change? Of course, my rich father replied. Everyone can change. But changing frames is not like changing jobs or professions. Changing frames often mean fundamentally changing who we are, how we think, and how we view the world. Changing is easier for some people than for others, simply because some people are in favor of change while others are resistant to it. And changing the framework is more often like changing their life. It's a change as profound as the centuries-old history of caterpillars turning into butterflies. Not only will you change, but your friends will change. As they continue to maintain relationships with their old friends, it is harder for kennels to do what butterflies do. So these are big changes, and few people choose to make them. The parking attendant closed the door, and my rich father left, leaving me to reflect on these differences. What are these differences? How do you tell if people are an E, T, P, or I if you don't know much about them? A way to do that and listen to them talk. One of my rich father's greatest talents was to read people, but he also believed that no one should be judged by appearances. My rich father, like Henry Ford, had little education, but both knew how to hire staff and work with supervisors. My wealthy father kept telling me that the art of getting brilliant people together and working as a team was one of his greatest qualities. When I was 9, my rich father started teaching me the skills to succeed in P and I. One of his skills was to go beyond appearances and seek to discover the fundamental qualities of others. My wealthy father used to say, if I listen to what a person says to me, I begin to see and feel their soul. So when I was a young boy, I started sitting next to my rich father as he was hiring people. From these interviews, I learned to listen not only to words, but also to look for the fundamental values that they reveal. The values that come from the soul, as my rich father used to say. The words in box E. A person working in the E employee framework could say, I am looking for a stable, well-paid job with excellent benefits. The words of the T frame. A self-employed person in the T setting could say, my hourly rate is $75, or my commission is usually 6%. Or I can't find people who want to work well, or I've invested more than 20 hours in this project. The words of the framework in peace. A peaceful business owner might say, I'm looking for a new president to run my business. The words in box I. A person in box I, an investor, might say, are my revenues based on the internal rate of return or on the net rate of return? Words are tools. As soon as my wealthy father had discovered the fundamental values of the person he was dealing with, he knew what he was really looking for, what he had to offer him, and what word to use to address him. My rich father used to say, words are powerful tools. My rich father kept reminding me and his son of this. If you want to be a leader, then you have to be a master of words. So mastery of words is one of the skills required to become a great piece. We have to know what impact our words will have on this or that person. My wealthy father first taught us to listen attentively to the speech of others, so that we could choose the words to use and those at the right time in order to respond as effectively as possible. My word might put off another. For example, the word risk can be stimulating for a person moving in frame I, while it will create a sense of apprehension in the person moving in frame E. My wealthy father said that to be a great leader, one must first master the art of listening. If you are not attentive to the word of others, you are not able to feel their soul. If you don't listen to the soul of others, you'll never know who you're talking to. The fundamental differences. My rich father used to say, listen to their words without their souls, because words are reflections of a person's fundamental values and differences. The following examples illustrate people's belonging to one or the other framework. Dial number 4, on page 3 of the schedule, represents the employee category. 1. The E employee. When I hear someone pronounce the words security or benefits, I have a good general idea of the individual in question. The word security is often associated with the notion of fear. If a person operating primarily in E experiences fear, then the need for safety often becomes apparent in their discourse. When it comes to money or jobs, many people feel the sense of fear that accompanies economic uncertainty hence the desire for security. The words benefits reflect a desire to receive some kind of additional reward, some specific and guaranteed compensation, such as health insurance or a pension plan. In fact, these people want to feel safe and they want written proof of that. Uncertainty doesn't make them happy. Certainty does. They say to themselves internally, I will give you this and you promise to give me this in exchange. They want a degree of certainty to compensate for their fear, and that is why they are looking for security and solid agreements when it comes to employment. They are right when they say, I am not that interested in money. For them, the notion of security is often much more important than money. Employees can be presidents or janitors. It's not so much what they do, but the contractual arrangement they have with the person or company that hires them. Box number 5 on page 4 of the schedule represents the self-employed category. 2. The self-employed. There are people who want to be their own boss or who like to do their own thing. I call this group the self-managers. Often, when it comes to money, pure and hard tea does not like to be dependent on others. In other words, if a tea works hard, it expects to be paid back. Teas don't like it when their income is set by someone else or by a group of people who might not be as hardworking as they are. Conversely, in their eyes, their work has value commensurate with their efforts. Their souls are fiercely independent when it comes to money. Fear. So while the E or employee often reacts to the fear of running out of money by seeking safety, T will have a different reaction. People in this environment do not respond to fear by seeking safety, but by taking control of the situation and doing things their own way. That's why I call the T of the self-managers. When it comes to fear and financial risk, they are taking the bull by the horns. This group includes well-educated professionals who have spent many years studying, such as doctors, lawyers, and dentists. The summer group also includes people who have acquired their instruction outside the walls of traditional educational institutions. They are paid commission representatives, such as real estate brokers, as well as small business owners, such as booksellers, dyers, restaurateurs, consultants, therapists, travel agents, mechanics, plumbers, carpenters, pastors, electricians, hairdressers, and artists. The band's favorite song could be titled, It Doesn't Happen to My Ankle or I. Do things my way. Self-employed workers are often true perfectionists. They want to do things exceptionally well. They are convinced that no one can do better than them, and that is why they do not trust others to perform tasks. In many ways, they are authentic artists who have their own way of working and style. And that's why we use their service. If you're dealing with a brain surgeon, you want them to have years of training and experience. But more importantly, you want him to be a perfectionist. The same goes for a dentist, hairdresser, marketing consultant, plumber, electrician, lawyer, or trainer. As an employer, you want the best. For those who operate within this framework, it is not the money that takes precedence, their independence, the freedom to do things their way and to be respected as an expert. Those are much more important to them. When they are used, it is better to tell them what they want and then give them carte blanche. They do not need or want to be supervised. If you interfere too much with their work, they can just cut it off and tell you to hire someone else. Remember, independence puts money on the back burner for this group. These people often have a lot of difficulty hiring employees simply because they believe that no one will be up to the task. Moreover, if they train staff, these employees often end up leaving them to do their own business, to be their own boss, to do things their own way, and to have the opportunity to express their individuality. Many are reluctant to hire and train employees because they often end up as competitors. As a result, they only work harder and always in their own way. Box number 6 on page 4 of the appendix represents the business owner category. 3. The P business owner. This group of individuals is virtually the opposite of the T's. Those who are true P's like to surround themselves with intelligent people from the 4 frames E, T, P, and I. Unlike the T who don't like to delegate their task because no one can do better than, the real P likes to delegate. his motto, and why do it yourself when we can hire someone to do it for us and do it better. Henry Ford falls into this category. As the legend goes, a group of so-called intellectuals accused Mr. Ford of being ignorant. He proclaimed that he didn't know much. So Henry Ford invited them into his office and challenged them to ask him any questions, saying he would answer them. So, gathered around America's most powerful industrialist, they began to question him. Mr. Ford listened to them and then phoned his brightest assistants to answer his questions. He ended the meeting by informing his interlocutors that he preferred to hire intelligent, educated people who could provide answers so that he could devote himself to more important tasks. Tasks like thinking. This is a quote attributed to Henry Ford. Thinking is the hardest job there is. That's why so few people do it. The leader will look for the best in people. Henry Ford was my rich father's idol. He made me read the biographies of people like Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil. My rich father would constantly encourage me and his son to internalize the essence of leadership and the hollowing out of business. With hindsight, I now understand that many people can master either of these elements, but to succeed as a piece, you really have to possess both. I also now realize that both of these skills can be acquired. There is a science of business and leadership, just as there is an art of business and leadership, and to me, it's lifelong learning. I was still very young when my rich father gave me the children's book, A Funny Soup, written in 1947 by Parcia Brown, and still on sale in most major bookstores. He started my leadership training by having me read this book. Leadership, said my rich father, and the ability to go out and get the best in people. So he instilled in me and his son the techniques necessary to succeed in business. Techniques related to reading financial statements, marketing, sales, accounting, management, production, and negotiation. Throughout each lesson, he put a lot of emphasis on how we learn to work with and lead people. My rich father used to say, "Techniques are simple, it's hard to work with people." As a reminder, I am still reading A Strange Soup today because I tend to act more in shooting than in leading when things are not going the way I want them to. Entrepreneurial development. I've often heard these words. I'm going to start my own business. Many people tend to believe that financial security and happiness can be achieved simply by doing one's own business or creating a brand new product. As a result, they are rushing to start their own businesses. In many cases, the path they take is to move from the employee category to the self-employed category. Refer to box 7 on page 5 of the annex. A large number of them engage in the frame T and not in the frame P. Again, one is not necessarily better than the other. Each has strengths and weaknesses, benefits and risks. But many people who want to move into the P frame still get into a T-type business and get stuck there, unable to get to the right side. A lot of new entrepreneurs would like to move from the employee category to the business owner category, as in box number 8 on page 5 of the schedule, but end up moving to the self-employed category and stagnating there, as in box number 9 on page 6 of the schedule. Many then try to move from the self-employed category to the business number 10 on page 6 of the annex, and only a small number of them manage to do so. Why? Because the technical and human skills needed to succeed in different settings are different. You need to assimilate deeply rooted techniques and mental attitudes and associate them with a given framework in order to really succeed. The difference between a T-type company and a P-type company. Those with real IP can leave their business for a year or more and return to a better position than when they left. However, if a T leaves their business for a year or more, there's a good chance that it will no longer exist when they return. So what distinguishes these two types of businesses? Let's just say the T has a job and the P has a system and they hire people who are competent to run it. In other words, the T is often the system itself and therefore cannot move away from it. Let's take the example of a typical dentist. A dentist spends years in school learning how to become an independent system. You, the client, had a toothache. You go to your dentist, he treats your tooth, you pay for it, and you go home. You feel good and you talk to your friends about this excellent dentist. In most cases, the dentist does all the work himself. The problem is that if he goes on vacation, his source of income does the same. Ps, business owners, can be on vacation forever because they have a system and not a job. If Peace takes a holiday, its source of income does not dry up. Success as a P requires A, the ownership or control of one business system, and B, the ability to lead others. For a T to pass through the P frame, it must convert what it is and what it knows into a system, and many are unable to do so, or are often too attached to the system to let others in. Can you make a better hamburger than McDonald's? Many people ask me for advice on how to start a business or find funding to launch a new product or idea. I usually listen to them for about 10 minutes, and then I can tell what their direction is. Is it the product or the business system? During those 10 minutes, I often heard words like these. Remember how important it is to listen and let words tell us about an individual's core intrinsic values. This product is far superior to that produced by XYZ. I've looked everywhere and nobody offers this product. I'll give you my idea. All I want is 25% of the profits. I have been working on this product, book, musical score, invention for years. These are the words used by the individual that evolve mainly on the left side, the E and T side. So it's important to be sensitive because we're dealing with fundamental values and ideas that have been festered for years, perhaps passed down from father to son for generations. A lack of delicacy or patience could shatter an even more fragile and important dream, a human being who finds himself poised to evolve into another setting. The hamburger is the business world. Because I have to be sensitive, I often use the example of the McDonald's hamburger to clarify things. After listening to them, I quietly ask them, can you personally make a better hamburger than McDonald's? So far, 100% of the people I've talked to about their new idea or their new products have said yes. They can all prepare, cook, and serve a better quality hamburger than McDonald's. And then I ask them this question. Can you personally build a better business system than McDonald's? Some people see the difference immediately and others don't. And I would say that this is because it is either on the left side of the dial, where the idea of the best hamburger predominates, or on the right side of the dial, where it is the notion of administrative system that takes precedence. I do my best to explain that there are many entrepreneurs who offer products or services that are far superior to those of the wealthy multinational corporations. Just as there are billions of people who can make a better hamburger than McDonald's, except McDonald's has a system that has allowed it to serve billions of burgers, or the other side. If people are able to start seeing that truth, I suggest they go to McDonald's, buy a hamburger, sit down and look at the system that is the basis of their meal. Think about the trucks that delivered the meat, the ranchers who raised the beef, the buyers who bought it, and the television commercials that helped sell the beef. To look at the training that has been given to all these inexperienced young people who all say the same words. Hello, welcome to McDonald's. As well as the decor of the franchise, the regional offices, the bakeries that produce the rolls, and the millions of kilos of chips that taste exactly the same everywhere in the world. And then think about the Wall Street broker who makes McDonald's stock grow. If they are able to begin to understand the bigger picture, then they have a chance to move from the left to the right. But the reality is that there is an unlimited number of new ideas out there. Billions of people have products or services to offer. Millions of products and only a few people who know how to build great business systems. Bill Gates from Microsoft didn't create a great product. He bought a product created by someone else and wrapped it in an extremely powerful administrative system. Box 11 on page 7 of the annex represents the category of investors. 4. The I investor. Investors make money from money. They do not need to work because their money is at their service. Dial I is the rich man's playground. Regardless of the framework from which people derive their income, if they hope to one day become rich, they must necessarily evolve in framework I. It is in this dial that money becomes rich. The cash flow frame. The cash flow framework simply illustrates the various ways of generating income, whether as an employee, self-employed, business owner, or investor. These distinctions, as illustrated in box 12 on page 7 of the annex, are as follows. Dear listeners, we hope you liked this book. You can listen to the full version of the book by following the link in the description. If you want to participate in the draw of nice gifts, subscribe to the channel, click like, and leave a comment under the video.